Hi, my name is Guy Picken. I'm an anaesthetist in Cape Town, and I've been a specialist for about 7 years, and I've been in private practice for just over 2 years. I've put this talk together because when the COVID pandemic started really hitting overseas, and we realized that it was going to affect us hugely here in South Africa, I experienced a lot of my own fear and anxiety around how it was going to affect me, my family, my ability to earn a living. And I started really working hard and trying to put resources together for the hospital that I work at and the anaesthetist here in the Western Cape. And I realized that if I didn't sort of slow down, that I would be burnt out by the time the COVID pandemic hit Cape Town, and I wouldn't be a lot of use to my colleagues and the people that I work with. So I started looking into trying to build up my own mental resilience, and that's where this talk comes from. So the title of the talk is Put Your Own Face Mask On First. And the point of the talk is to try to improve healthcare workers' resilience to cope with the COVID-19 pandemic. So I hope you found it useful. So what are you experiencing? Fear or worry about your own or your loved one's health? Are you afraid of the moral dilemmas that we will be faced with? Have you experienced any changes in your sleep or eating patterns? Are you reacting impulsively or impatiently with your family or your friends or your patients? Have you been sharing information compulsively or perhaps without consideration? Have you been complaining a lot? Have you been having any difficulty sleeping or concentrating? Have you been feeling depressed or overwhelmed or isolated? Have you been in any WhatsApp or social media battles? Have you been feeling tired or drained? And have you felt that if you saturate yourself in all the information that you will pass this test? So I can tell you that I've experienced all of those things, and I'm sure many of you have as well. So my disclaimer for this talk is that we're all walking this road together. I'm not an expert, and this is certainly not meant to be a lecture. I'm hoping to share some of the lessons that I'm learning in trying to deal with my own fear and anxiety. And please imagine that we are having a discussion. I'm not trying to teach you anything. Maybe just try and focus on what your own concerns are and how these relate, and how some of the things that we're going to talk about this evening relate to you. And then maybe consider what your own personal approaches will be to reduce the stress in your life and how you may want to build your own mental resilience. So at the moment in Cape Town, we are in the acceleration phase of, it's the end of June, and we're in the acceleration phase of the COVID pandemic. We hope that we will be reaching the peak soon. And at this point in time, many hospitals have almost, if not already, reached their capacity. And I know that a lot of healthcare workers are really struggling with the burdens that are being placed on them at the moment. And I'm hoping that this talk will perhaps be able to help them with some of the issues that they are dealing with. So the title of this talk is Put Your Own Face Mask On First. We've all sat in airplanes and heard the words, in the event of a sudden loss of cabin pressure, put your own face mask on first before helping others. And at this point in time in our lives, we need to practice self-care before we can care for anybody else. Medics are often very self-reliant. We don't like to ask for help, but you cannot serve from an empty vessel. And self-care does not mean that you're being selfish. It means giving the best of you and not what is left of you. So even before COVID-19, medics were feeling a lot of threat in South Africa. We're experiencing pressure from all sides, from patients, from funders, from hospital groups, and medical legal. There is unprecedented levels of depression and suicide amongst our medical fraternity. And now we are facing a new and extraordinary threat. It's posing a threat to the health of ourselves, our loved ones, and our patients. We may be feeling isolated more than usual. We're all experiencing financial strain. Those in private practice have lost anything from 70 to 50% of their normal revenue. We know that we are experiencing and we're going to experience a moral injury. In other words, we're going to see our patients suffering and we're not necessarily going to be able to do anything about it. We're all dealing with, those of us with kids, we're all dealing with the challenges of homeschooling. And then we're being bombarded in the news and social media with overload, misinformation, a lot of bad signs, and a lot of unnecessary data. A lot of our friends and family are not necessarily believing the true danger of COVID-19 and the true extent that this virus will have on people. And we are all being tested physically, mentally, and emotionally. Our days have gotten longer and our patients' suffering has become greater. And on top of that, the usual stresses have not gone away. We are now being asked to run into a burning building. And this is not something that we as medics are used to experiencing. We're not like firefighters or policemen in that we're not used to experiencing personal danger in our normal day-to-day lives. And all of us have a bucket of emotional, mental, and physical resources or capacity. Some of our buckets are half full, and some of them are filled to the brim. Some of us, our capacity or our mental resources empty quickly, and some of us are able to refill our buckets quickly. And now, during this period of lockdown, without holidays and exercise and outdoor activities and time with friends, these are our usual ways to refill our buckets, and they have now become reduced. So on the one side, we're experiencing increased demand and increased stress. And on the other side, we have our resource bucket with a reduced ability to refill it. And what does this imbalance lead to? It's going to lead to burnout. So fear and anxiety or worry are normal emotions, and they help to keep us safe. They heighten our responses. We all know that before we started properly studying for our big exams, we all knew that you needed a bit of fear and a bit of anxiety to really get you going and motivate you. But anticipation or worry is a double-edged sword. Too little, and you'll be surprised a lot of the time. And too much anticipation or too much worry, and you end up worrying all the time. So what motivates us? Well, on the one side, you've got fear and emotion. This part of our motivation is driven by our limbic brain, which is our fight, flight, freeze response. It's our stress response, and it's driven by adrenaline and cortisol. On the other side of our brain, we have our prefrontal cortex, which is our thinking brain. This side of our brain gives us empathy, insight, response flexibility, emotional regulation. body regulation. It helps us deal with our morality, our intuition, our attuned communication, and our fear modulation. The prefrontal cortex gives us our wisdom. When we are called, we go. So there's this poem written by William Carlos Williams about a century ago, and I'll read it to you. They call me and I go. It is a frozen road past midnight, a dust of snow caught in the rigid wheel tracks. The door opens, I smile, enter, and shake off the cold. Here is a great woman on her side in the bed. She is sick, perhaps vomiting, perhaps laboring to give birth to her 10th child. Joy, joy. Night is a room darkened for lovers. Through the jealousies, the sun has sent one golden needle. I pick the hair from her eyes and watch her misery with compassion. Ever since medical school, we have all been summoned urgently to care for patients. This call generates a complex list of emotions within us. It may be apprehension, curiosity, annoyance, gratitude, exasperation, pride, and sometimes even joy. This call is a duty that we are bound by, and it is hard for us to explain. We are also experiencing gratitude from the public and from friends for being on the front line. For many of us, this may make us feel like a fraud. What is the front line? And perhaps it's just a commitment to be there. Many of us have experienced what we can term pre-traumatic stress. This is the waiting for the surge of the COVID-19 pandemic. And there's a saying that my dad used to enjoy telling us: when the going gets tough, the tough get going. And for me, certainly the wait for this hope to be tough enough has caused me anticipatory anxiety. And I'm sure many of us are also experiencing anticipatory anxiety to experience others' suffering. So what stage are you in? Are you still in the fear zone? Now, we've all been there, and in the fear zone, we're impatient. We are obsessive around the information. We share the information without thinking. And we cultivate fear and frustration and worry and anger amongst our friends and our family, and maybe even our patients. Or are you in the learning zone? This is a zone where you're looking in at yourself, where you're able to identify and become aware of what your feelings and emotions are. You're able to let them go. You're able to process the information before just sharing it. Or have you got into the growth zone? During this zone, you're able to look outwards. You're able to show patience, optimism, appreciation. You're able to become a comfort to others. If you're able to get yourself into the growth zone, you're able to become a force multiplier and show other people the power of empathy and the power of hope. So how do we get into the growth zone? So now we're going to talk about some aspects or things that you can think about to try and perhaps change your perspective around what is happening in your life. So the first thing is to try and reframe your thoughts. So, in other words, it matters where we focus our attention. Whatever we give attention to will grow. And that our attitudes is a moment-by-moment choice. How we respond to an irritating phone call is our choice. And by remaining in the fear zone, not only will we destroy our own morale, but those of the morale of others around us, and we reduce our capacity to respond effectively. So we need to try and see things differently. We need to try and catch and untwist our negative thoughts. We need to try as best we can to explain others' behavior in a positive way, rather than assuming that it's a negative way, assuming that it's always, or perhaps a negative way that person is behaving. And we need to try and celebrate what's right in the world. So in other words, by changing our lens and by changing our perspective on the way that some things are happening, we're able to change our world. And perhaps we need to try and think about and focus on what good will perhaps come from this. Will it unify us? Will it improve our camaraderie? Will it maybe improve the appreciation for the medical profession? We need to try and take time to make sense of our experiences. And how do we make sense of our experiences? Well, we can do that through articulating them. So the first way would be to perhaps keep a journal. And the idea behind this is, how can I know what I think until I've read what I've written? And it does help to make things clearer, maybe more rational, and maybe more acceptable in your own mind. Another way would be to have a thinking partner. So in other words, how can I know what I think until I've heard what I've said? We all know that when we verbalize our experiences and talk through them, it helps to clear our thoughts and it helps to give us perspective. We need to invest in relationships and we need to invest in ourselves. So the idea here is that the quality of our relationships influences the quality of our thinking, which influences the quality of our actions and thereby the quality of our results. We need to try and meet people where they are. In other words, try and understand the place where they're at. Are they still in the fear zone? Or are they dealing with difficult things in their lives? We need to try and meet them with compassion and try and meet them without judgment. We're all in a different zone dealing with this crisis, and we're all dealing with it in our own ways. And then in dealing with yourself, realize that it's okay not to feel okay. You need to try and be compassionate with yourself. Encourage yourself to feel in a real and authentic way and to try and lower your defenses. Try and accept your fear or your sadness or your anxiety. And in doing so, try and bring back memories of hope and of happiness and realize that you are not alone and reach out to those around you. We need to try and focus on the present. So there's this concept that depression, if you focus on the past, that depression lives in the past. And if you focus a lot on the future, anxiety lives in the future. So we need to try and focus our energy and our attention on the present. And in doing so, we try and ground ourselves. And focusing on the present is important and it is necessary. You can do this by learning breathing exercises, by practicing mindfulness. By doing this, you learn to anchor yourself and it brings you back to the present moment. You try and sort of accept your thoughts of the past and you accept your thoughts of the future. But you just try and focus on the now, on where am I right now? How am I feeling? How does the ground feel underneath my feet? How does the wind feel on my cheek? And try and really bring yourself into this very moment. And by doing so, you try and push that limbic, or you try and get that prefrontal part of your brain working, and try and reduce the influence of the limbic part of your brain. And that anchors that you practice will try and bring you back to the present. When you're feeling stressed or overwhelmed, or you feel like you need a timeout, just stop. Stop. Take a breath. Observe your body. Just let it be. And then proceed with the next task that needs your attention the most. This is just a quick way just to kind of reset yourself and then move on. So what are some of the strategies for coping to avoid burnout? So the first thing is we need to take care of the basics. We need to eat, we need to sleep, we need to exercise. All of these things you need to pay attention to. They all have physical and mental benefits, and we all know that. But now, probably more than ever, we need to pay attention to those things. We need to try and compartmentalize. So in other words, try and leave your work worries at work. And when you get home, try and be present and be at home. Try and reframe. So catch and untwist those negative thoughts, and try and focus on the positive rather than the negative way that people are behaving around yourself. Try and limit your exposure to information. So in other words, use trusted sources of information. Limit the time that you spend on social media, and perhaps unfriend those friends that you have that are not believing that we're dealing with a true pandemic, and how dangerous this is for all of us. Take cell phone breaks. Try not get sucked into your cell phone and spend all your time on it. This will help you to be present when you're at home. And focus on what you have control of. So in other words, take some time to plan and prepare. Where will you quarantine if you need to? Maybe prepare for the difficult conversations that you know that you're going to need to have, or perhaps you've already needed to have with patients and their families. And then from a financial aspect, try and limit your expenses. Make your financial plans. Try and get your financial house in order as best you can. We're all going through this phase of trying to develop new habits and routines. And there's actually a lot of good evidence of why habits and routines are useful to us. And a habit or a routine starts with a deliberate action. It's goal-directed, and then with time it becomes subconscious. And in doing so, it reduces our cognitive load. It reduces the amount of time that our brain needs to concentrate to perform that particular task. And in doing so, it provides us with confidence, or a feeling of confidence, security, and safety. So make an effort to develop new habits and routines that you need to make in order to try and reduce some of the stress that you're experiencing in your life. Practice self-care. So we've spoken about this a little bit already, but you may also need to say no for safety. In other words, you don't embark on a particular task that you're asked to do if you feel that it's unsafe. And this may take courage. It may, and sometimes it'll take more courage to not do something than perhaps to get into an unsafe situation. And remember to stop and take breaks and allow time for your bucket to refill and recharge. So by learning to do this, and by learning to slow down and use your breaks, it helps you to train your mind so that you're able to speed up. It gives you the ability to speed up when you need to. And in doing these things, we need to try and build up our resources and reduce our demands. We need to take time to be proud of our achievements. Many of us don't take the time to be proud of our achievements, and we just move on as though it's just another day done. We need to remember to be grateful, not only for the things that we're doing ourselves, but what those around us are doing for us and for the patients that we're working with. And we need to try and practice Stoicism. So Stoicism is obviously an ancient concept, and there are three sort of C's that we can focus on. So the first is to try and control what we can, to try and cope with what we can't. So in other words, try and cope with what we can't control. And then to really try and focus and concentrate on what's important and what counts. So this is a really new and hopefully will be very useful initiative, and it's an initiative that a group have put together in connection with the South African Society of Anaesthetists and Psychiatrists and SAMA and the Psychological Society of South Africa. So I think the key here is to reach out to these people that have got together and started this initiative. And they're there. There's a 24-hour helpline. They've got a website. There's a whole bunch of resources on it. And there are people that are caring for the carers. And this is by the carers. So hopefully this initiative will be really useful. And then I really like this idea of what story will you tell of this time? In other words, it kind of, I think for me, it helps me kind of give an overall perspective of this COVID time that we are living in. And it maybe helps me to try and focus on sort of how I want to kind of, what sort of person I want to be during this COVID-19 era. And the idea here is that you are the author of the story. So in other words, it's what story will you tell of this time? What story will you tell your kids or your family or your grandchildren eventually? And some of the ideas here are what principles guided you? What did you stand up for? What attitudes informed your actions? What habits did you cultivate? How did you act in small and big ways for common good, both as a leader, a friend, a spouse, a parent, or a community member? What relationships did you rely on? What new relationships did you create or deepen? What were you grateful for during this time? How were you touched or changed by the experience? What remained steady and true in your life? What strengths did you rely on? And what new strengths did you discover? What did you learn about yourself? And what did you learn about your closest relationships? And how did you grow as a leader? How did you grow as a human being? And how did you stretch yourself? So in closing, we're just going to go through some takeaway thoughts and hopefully sort of put some of the ideas that I've shared with you this evening together and perhaps remind you of some of the things we've already spoken about. So the first concept is that we're all leaders in our environments as medical professionals. And this is a true time to stand up and show visible leadership. So the people that work with us, they want to feel heard. They want to feel protected. They want to feel prepared. They want to feel supported, and they want to feel cared for. So we need to take the time more than ever before to really spend time with the people that work with us or for us, and train them and prepare them and support them and show them that we really care for them. We need to really focus our attention and our energy on what matters most during this time and what we have control over. We need to try and not worry about the things that are out of our control and truly focus on the things that we are in control of. We need to practice those 3 C's of Stoicism: control what we can, cope with what we can't, and concentrate on what counts. And in doing so, we need to try and zone out all the noise, all the peripheral things that are going on that are out of our control. And we need to try and take the time to make plans. And by making plans in our lives, it helps us to regain control over the things that we are in control of. We need to remember that our attitude is, by and large, a choice that we can make, a moment-by-moment choice. We need to try and reframe those negative thoughts and catch and untwist them and try and turn them into something positive. We need to try and keep our sense of humor as best we can. Try and laugh at how tired you are, or how stressed you are, or how bad your face looks after it's been squished by a mask for a few hours. We need to be prepared to fail despite giving our best. For many, this is a difficult concept to deal with, and it's perhaps something that is creating more stress in our lives. And we need to try and build new habits to promote our mental well-being and increase our resource buckets. We need to try and take time to make sense of our experiences through written or talking, having a thinking partner. Remember, when you're feeling stressed and overwhelmed, just to stop. Take a breath, observe yourself, your body, how you're feeling, and then proceed with the next most important task. Learn those breathing exercises and practice those aspects of mindfulness to try and bring you back to the present. And in doing those things and focusing some of our energy on our own self-care, hopefully we can bring our best selves forward by filling our tank at every opportunity. We need to remember to pace ourselves. This is not a sprint. The peak of the COVID pandemic is going to be with us for a while, and we need to try and be effective at combating this for as long as we can during that time. We need to remember to be kind to others as well as to ourselves. And we need to, as healthcare workers, stick together fiercely during this time and really support one another. So in closing, just a reminder about this healthcare workers care network, this new initiative, and it's this idea of caring for the carers by the carers. Use this as a resource. And then a friend, Dr. Nicola Graham, she has started this group called Thoughtsmiths. They've been going for a while, and they are providing support for frontline clinicians during COVID-19. And they might also be a resource that you can tap into and use. So just in closing, this African proverb: if you want to walk fast, walk alone. If you want to walk far, walk together. So we will get through this together. We need to stick together. We need to realize that we're all dealing with this in our own way. And I'm hoping that that this talk of put your own face mask on first will hopefully give you a few tools to improve your own mental well-being and your own mental resilience. And hopefully it's just a reminder that this is a road we're walking together. And I wish you all well, and take care of yourselves. And I think just reach out, and let's support one another during this time.